Like every other clone trooper, Cody was born and trained on the planet Kamino to serve as a soldier of the Galactic Republic. At the beginning of the war, Commander Cody was under the command of Jedi General Obi-Wan Kenobi and frequently fought alongside him, developing mutual trust and camaraderie as they fought alongside each other. He was also given command of the 212th Attack Battalion. Although Cody was not involved in the Battle of Geonosis, he took part in many other battles during the Clone Wars, including at Tiburon with Captain Rex. At the end of the war, Cody received Order 66 from Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. Regardless of having served under Kenobi, Cody's loyalty was abolished by his biochip. The order triggered the clone protocol within his genetically implanted biochip, and Cody immediately turned against Kenobi, ordering his forces to fire on the Jedi Master, blasting him with a shot from an all-terrain tactical enforcer. Kenobi survived, however, becoming one of the few Jedi to escape the destruction of the Jedi Order. 15 years after the rise of the Galactic Empire, many of the codes and emergency protocols that Cody and Rex had come up with during the Clone Wars were still in use by the Empire. Hello to you newcomers and welcome back, my lovely subscribers. This is Big Baby Props, and I'm the Big Baby. Today I'll be showing you guys how to make your own Commander Cody helmet. This helmet has been heavily requested, so I'm very excited to have this video ready for you guys. Commander Cody is probably the second most recognizable clone. My guess would be behind Captain Rex. He also has one of the most decorated helmets out of any of the clones. He's got a visor, he's got a rear antenna, he's got a radio attached to the side, he's got a flashlight, and he's got helmet strips along the top. Like I said, a very decked out helmet. So let's jump right in to how we're going to go about making this helmet. As with all my helmet tutorials, we're going to start with the 3D printed pieces. For those of you with 3D printers, I've linked the files in the description. If you don't have a 3D printer, I also sell the pieces we start with in my shop. Check it out in the description. The first thing we'll need to do is assemble the pieces of the helmet. More than likely, you'll need to print this helmet in a few pieces since it is on the larger side. To join the main pieces, we're going to be using a sandpaper pad glued to a flat surface, some cyanoacrylate superglue, and maybe a soldering iron. Start by sanding the edges of the helmet we're going to be gluing together. That's going to do two things for us. One, it's going to make the transition between pieces all the more flawless and seamless. The more gaps between pieces, the more sanding and filling we'll have to do down the line. And two, it's going to help our super glue bond a lot faster so we won't have to hold it in place as long. Sometimes I like to add a little reinforcement to the inside of the helmet along the seam lines with like E6000 or by heating up a soldering iron and physically welding the two plastic pieces together. I've also used a two-part resin on the inside before, but keep in mind it will significantly increase the weight of the helmet. This is the first step, but also one of the most critical to get right. If one of the pieces is misaligned, it might be difficult or impossible to realign it or sand it out. So be patient and hold the helmet together until the glue sets. The next thing we need to do is start smoothing out the 3D printer lines. This is an important step and cannot be skipped. If we tried to paint the helmet straight away, the quality would only be a fraction of what it's capable of. To start filling in the lines, we're going to use Rust-Oleum filler primer. Now, filler primer is much thicker than your regular primer, and it's also sandable. So what we're going to do is give the helmet 3 to 4 heavy coats of filler primer, let that primer seep into the print lines, and then sand it down to a smooth finish. You can go a little wild with the filler primer at this step, so don't worry too much about streaks or smudges, since we're going to be sanding it all smooth anyway. Wait about 20 minutes in between coats and make sure you get all the pieces of the helmet. Filler primer excels at filling in a lot of the smaller print lines. What it isn't so great at is filling in some of the steeper ones near the top or the bottom of the helmet. For that, we're going to be using a product called Bondo Spot Putty. Bondo is a very popular choice in the prop making world since it comes out of a tube with kind of a toothpaste consistency, but over a short while will harden to the point where it can sand smooth. Use Bondo along the thick layer lines of the helmet as well as the seams between the joint parts. This will ensure a smooth transition between the multiple pieces of the helmet as well as a smooth surface for painting. Once the Bondo is hardened over a few hours, we can begin sanding. Now, sanding is definitely the hardest part of the whole process So if you guys can make it through this, the rest is a lot more fun, I promise. For the first round of sanding, I like to use a powered mouse sander. These things are great for getting a bulk of the heavy work done. Just be careful not to sand too far, or you'll shred the plastic underneath. Use a medium grit pad to make sure it's not too rough. I only use the mouse sander on the large pieces of the helmet, not the extra accessories, since those are a little bit more delicate. After you've done a quick round with the mouse sander, we can swap to hand sanding. I used a 150 grit pad of sandpaper to get the rest of the Bondo and filler primer the mouse couldn't reach. After that, I use a 300 grit sandpaper to smooth it all out. At this point, you might have realized you missed a spot or two with the Bondo or filler primer, and that's perfectly fine. All you need to do is repeat the filler primer and Bondo steps, then re-sand. After I'm happy with the smoothness of the helmet, I'll usually cover it in one more layer of filler primer, just to get it all in one uniform color, and then sand it again with 300 grit sandpaper. And once the helmet is smoothed to your satisfaction, we can begin painting. As with most clones, we're going to be applying a base coat of white. We're going to be using a flat white, because I found that if you're going to be weathering the helmet, which we are, the flat white works better at holding onto the grime than a white gloss. Do it in very light coats, since if you have any runs or streaks at this point, you're going to have to sand them down once they've dried. Once our base coat is finished, we're going to be using some masking tape to outline our design. I use a combination of thin masking tape for the edge and thicker masking tape for coverage. In some cases, I've even used plastic bags to cover a very large area. Just make sure they don't have any holes in them. Also, make sure to tape a bit farther than you think so we don't get any stray paint particles where we don't want them. I always do one color at a time when doing my taping and painting to minimize the risk of painting something you didn't intend to. Cody's helmet obviously has a lot of extra pieces compared to a regular Phase 2, but we're going to look specifically at the visor. I used our thin masking tape to lay out the rough design, then cut it down with an X-Acto knife. For painting, we're going to be using an airbrush instead of a rattle can, simply because I already had the 212th paint from when we did the 212th Airborne Trooper helmet, and I'm kind of a cheap ass that didn't want to buy more paint. When using an airbrush, just remember to have your air pressure low enough it won't cause streaks, but high enough so you're not painting for 6 hours. We're going to be using this orange for the visor, as well as the triangles surrounding the aerators. Cody has a few other colors as well. I used a warm caramel rattle can for the helmet strips, and a flat red for the brow that sits above the visor. To be honest, I was kind of surprised Cody's helmet had any red in it at all, but indeed it does. Once our paint is dried, we can peel off the tape. This is definitely one of my favorite parts of the process, simply because it's so satisfying. Now that we've got it all mostly painted, we can begin the weathering process. The weathering process is vital for giving your helmet an authentic battle damaged look. Luckily, you don't have to be a master airbrusher to get great effects. The supplies we need are going to be pretty simple. There can be some gloves, some black acrylic paint, a cup, a sponge brush, and paper towels. What we're going to be doing is adding some paint to the cup and then adding a small amount of water to that cup to make a black liquid mixture. We're then going to paint that mixture over the helmet, letting the paint soak into all the pieces of the helmet. After a few seconds of soaking, we'll follow it up with a paper towel and wipe away a majority of the paint. What's going to be left is a small amount of paint in all the areas, but especially the recessed areas that couldn't get cleaned out as well. This is what gives it the realistic effect of general dirtiness and really sets the helmet apart from a clean white. We're going to be repeating this process in small portions around the helmet until we've got the thing as dirty as we like. A nice benefit of this process is you can continue it for as long as you like. Each iteration will make the helmet dirtier and dirtier in appearance, and you can basically go as many times around as you want. As you're weathering the helmet, you need to be careful to watch for streaks. Since we're applying a watery mixture, it's quite common for a streak to run alongside the helmet somewhere where you didn't intend it to. You need to clean those streaks up as soon as you notice them, or else the paint will kind of set in too far and you'll need to fix it, since it just looks like a streak of black and doesn't look realistic at all. With the helmet now weathered, we are almost completely finished, but what clone trooper would be complete without a visor? I like to use the Hobart face shield as my visor. It's clean, cheap, and definitely looks like the real deal. Find a link for it in the description. I just cut out a small section of the visor I needed. The face shield is flexible, but it's always trying to straighten itself out, so cutting out only what you need helps reduce the force behind that, making it easier to hold down in place. The nice thing is one Hobart face shield, when you're only cutting what you need, has enough material for 2 helmets. For now, I'm just going to be using duct tape to hold the visor in place, since this is only a display piece. With the visor in place, I can now say that we are finished with our Commander Cody helmet. I'm very happy with how it turned out, and I hope you guys are too. Remember to check out the description for a link to all the materials and files used in this video. I hope you learned something from the video. I hope you're feeling confident enough to take a project like this on yourself. And as always, I hope to see you guys again in the next video.